Hello and welcome to Quit Your Crappy Job, Finding Courage for Positive Change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Quit Your Crappy Job podcast. I'm Jeff Hughes.
And I'm Scott Wilson, and we are happy to have with us Tim Mueting and Christine Pettit. How are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Very good. Thank you.
Perfect. So Tim and Christine are here to join us today to share their career lifestyle journey. In brief summary, they quit or had quit, had their job quit on them, whatever. They came to a change in their careers, and they decided, of all things, that instead of getting that next corporate job, they would go live a life on a boat and sail the Caribbean, Eastern Seaboard, and so forth. And just for a little bit of context before we jump in and have them show their story, this wasn't one of those great resignation stories where they're just retiring and whatever. This was literally a lifestyle change. And but we'll let them explain what that exactly means. We get into that. So Tim and Christine, before we get into this, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, tell the audience a bit about yourselves, and then we'll jump into your story.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Scott and I, we worked together for a period of time. That would have been the last corporate job I had before I left there. I started in
the tech industry,
the high tech field, I guess you could say. Thought I wanted to be a programmer. Had always been looking for something creative to do that also had a paycheck tied to it. And for some reason, that's kind of what I was searching for. And anyway, so I started in programming with a company called EDS, which I think I've heard mentioned on this podcast even before, up in your area, Jeff, back when they were just a pretty young company, I guess, at the time. And quickly found out that at least at that phase, programming in a big corporate environment didn't take a lot of creativity. It was pretty much thrust upon you. But I was also very fortunate in being kind of at the time of some new things happening in tech, and one of them was called relational databases, well before all of the things that we know today, a long time ago. And I got into it very early, and that kind of gave me that kind of creative outlet. And I moved kind of through the ranks within the company as well, then left and did a lot of consulting work, and it gave me an opportunity to do a lot of different things, and eventually led me to working in the software industry for a variety of places. I worked in startups. I worked for major companies like BMC Software and CA Technologies. Both were kind of had their history or their beginnings in mainframe. So again, starting out back in the early or mid to late 80s, there's still a lot of mainframe stuff going on, and that's where I am.
So Tim,
How about you,
the risk
Christine?
of getting, hold on one second, Jack, if you don't mind, just to, definition of terms here a little bit for our customer, dare I ask?
Yeah.
Do you have a simple explanation for what a relational database is? You just mentioned you got into that. People may not understand what that is.
Yeah, I think it was really how you're accessing data via programs. And so back in those days, everything was pretty complicated. All of your major banks, insurance companies, all of those corporations, all the backend systems were run on different types of databases that were much harder to get the data out of. So it took a lot of programming. And when relational came along, you can think of those as kind of, for lack of a better term, tables of data. Well, we normally look at data today, and it's fairly easy to do searches and queries and things and get that information out. Well, now we've moved way past that, obviously. But that was kind of the first foray into letting certain people get at information in a much easier format than having to know programming language. So it was really kind of just sticking our big toe into that area of data analysis in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and Tim, I think I would add to that.
Is that kind of clear?
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing I would add to that, just again to help our perhaps non-technical audiences, you can think of it as lists. Relational databases
Yeah,
was that first evolution to try to optimize things. So if I had a contact list like on your phone, I got their phone number, I got their address, and now maybe I have, if I'm at a Walmart, I have a customer list or the shopping list. Well, I would have to replicate all that address information in a separate list so that I had it. And a relational database said, no, no, no. Once you have some of these fields once, let's just find the relationship between the two and link them. Therefore, we can save space, make it faster to get a hold of the data, right? You're not duplicating all these things.
exactly,
Not to get into a
exactly.
complete nerd
Yep,
fest, but
and
just
it wasn't just you didn't. Yeah, you didn't have to have a store of data for a particular purpose. That store of data got broadened to for multiple purposes within
exactly.
a company or cross companies
Yep.
or whatever it might be.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. So,
So
Christine.
that kind of led me.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Keep
yeah.
going. I didn't mean to
Oh,
cut you off. I wasn't sure if you were at
no.
a stopping
No,
point,
no, no. I
Tim.
was just going to say that led me into gave me many opportunities because it was so new. I enjoyed it. It gave me an opportunity to be creative and do design work and do kind of performance type of work and do different things, and that was fun. And then that just kind of led me into the software companies where I got to participate in creating new products or expanding on product ideas and things like that. So that's kind of how I got into this whole mess from that perspective.
And Jeff, did you still have a question for
No.
Tim?
No, I was just commenting on wanting to hear Christine tell her intro.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
Christine,
all
tell us
right.
a little bit about yourself.
Um, so, yeah, so long time Austin native, moved to Austin, Texas in '81. My dad taught at UT, so that's how we got to Austin. And I started my professional career, I guess. I was one of the first 81 people to be hired at Dell before it was even Dell. And so
Wow.
I worked there forever, um, and then switched, uh, switched tax, sailing term, I guess. Anyway, so switched taxes, wound up working for a telecom company as an admin for the VP of marketing. And then what happened is, I guess I should have prefaced this, that my previous life, professional life, was as an event manager, focusing on trade shows. So that's what my latest work experience has been. So back to the telecom marketing situation, that they had one of the uh, ladies quit, and she was the person who was coordinating their presence at a trade show. And so everybody's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, oh, I'll do it. Like, so that's kind of how I fell into doing events. Is that the girl quit, and then I just, you know, picked up the slack where her duties on that. So then fast forward a little bit, worked and did events for IBM and AMD, and then worked at my latest job was with a very large Austin-based company. That's I will not name them, but they are in the HR space. They are a job board. So I will leave it at that. I think everyone can kind of figure out what that is. So I have more than 10 years of experience doing events and trade shows, domestically and internationally. And that's my professional career. I quit that job in 2018 so we could focus on getting ready to, get the boat going and move to where the boat was, and just get our sailing journey started. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell. It's a lot of technology space, a lot of kind of not really new companies, but in a just technology, I guess. Awesome companies. Yeah.
So, how did you two meet? Let's maybe talk about you guys as a couple then, and tell us a little bit about that story.
So how we met was when I was the event manager doing the trade shows at AMD, Tim was my speaker. So for one of the sessions that we had signed up for, so I was the one harassing him, like, hey, kind of need your presentation. Like, hey, hi, here's the whatever the playbook. Do you have your hotel and here's your badge and all that other stuff. So that's how we met. Yeah, we were both at AMD.
And
Yeah.
baby,
So one of the things when you talk about, go ahead, Scott.
no, go ahead.
I was saying one of the things for me, we talk about making decisions and making some tough decisions or being afraid, having fear of things. One of the things that was apparent to me when I first went to work in software companies is I was pretty good at one-on-one speaking. I went out and did a lot of quote technical sales, so assisting sales from a technical perspective, and felt pretty comfortable with that. I was pretty much terrified of speaking to large groups of people in public and giving, doing those kinds of things. So that was one of the things I think that drove me, was that I wanted to be able to do that and do it better, just to be better at those types of opportunities and take advantage of those opportunities. So I really worked hard when I was at BMC to at least begin, doing those things. And the AMD opportunity came up, which was totally different than a software company. And it was probably one of the most fun jobs I'd had or I have had in my life, and that it was just a very interesting company. Um, we were the number two to Intel kind of thing. So we had a lot of fans. A lot of people wanted to see AMD do well. So that was always kind of fun. If you went to trade shows, it was always lots of encouragement, let's say. But I got into an area there too that was pretty unique at the time. And a large part of my job was traveling around and helping people understand what chip architecture and technology in the actual CPU can do for software and performance. And at the time, things called like virtualization. And so if anybody out there has heard of a company like VMware or that, again, going back in time, it was kind of the first foray into being able to run, I'll use a technical term, but multiple images on a single machine. And so AMD had done some things within the actual hardware that made that, it gave them some advantages. We thought some advantages. So that was kind of what I focused on. And lo and behold, through all the events that we did, I met Christine, and she had a much, much harder job than I did, without question. She got there days before the event and stayed until the last people in the exhibit hall or wherever we might be were gone. I could show up and give her my presentation at the last minute and get it going and leave. So she did have a much harder job than I did, but it was a lot of fun. And I think it was after a few years, actually, that we worked together, that we decided that maybe we kind of liked each other. Things went from there.
Yep.
And haven't looked back. It sounds like.
I haven't looked back. I left the AMD and had the opportunity to go to CA. Christine went to a couple other companies here in Austin. We started planning our future, if you will, what we were thinking about doing, and something that I had certainly thought about for years and years, and tried to put together a very, very loose, rickety plan on how to get there.
Right.
So, which we can talk about as we go forward.
Yeah. So before we talk about that, if I can interject to explain this virtualization thing, you said multiple images of that is, by the way, can be very difficult to do. So I'm going to try, because I remember showing somebody that concept, Tim, and they just stared at it and did not know what they were looking at. But the basic concept Tim talked about is that it's like your iPhone, your smartphone having multiple copies of the operating system, the iOS, on it. Now, you as a consumer wouldn't care so much about this, but if I were developing an app that you use, like I don't know. I know this the other day. I think Burger King had some big coupon on their app that someone told me about, so I had to download the app to get the 69-cent Whopper. I don't know. It was some weird thing, right? Fine. Well, if you're Burger King, right, or Walmart or whoever, you want multiple copies of different type of phones and configurations so you could test to make sure the app would work. So for them, the option is to either buy every single different type of phone, or they could have a virtual copy of each of those different type of phones, a software copy on the single device, on the single phone, to try to really dumb this down. And basically the entire internet nowadays works off this virtualization technology, which there's no need even getting into that. But just
Right.
wanted to level set that.
Exactly.
I try to help make sure people understand
And
some of these terms.
no,
we
another
talk
way
about.
might be to look at it is absolutely. If you have your laptop and maybe, there's basically today Mac and Windows, and if you have an application that runs on Windows, but you have a Mac machine, there are ways to run that Windows application under an environment that would speak to that. We actually had to do that on the boat, just sideline, where a certain vendor only supported Windows. And in order to update our navigational equipment, we had to figure out a way to get that to run, because we're pretty much Macs here. So to get to run on that machine, that's kind of the basis of this technology. As you said, it's used everywhere.
Right. Okay, good. Definitions done, Nerdfest done.
Yeah, yes, what we were doing.
So you guys seem pretty well established, doing well in your careers. Maybe walk us through to a point when it sounds like both of you felt like you had to make a change.
Oh, I will start with that. So it's 2008. I am at what? I am working at AMD, and some. Now this was in 2008, April. So we all know what happened in 2008. It was a. Anyway, I don't want to use poor language. So there was, shenanigans that went down between me and the management, not AMD, because AMD actually subcontracted a lot of their event work to a third party. So this was not AMD. AMD was not actually involved in this. So shenanigans went down, and they tried to pull a fast one on me. And I'm like, you know what? I really, I don't want to be here anymore. So thank you for trying to write me up, but I'll see you later. And it was dead silent in the room. There was me and 4 other people. And I put my badge down and I said, see you later. I hope everyone has a great weekend. And I walked out, and my team lead at the time ran down the hall, or she followed me down the hall. She's like, hey, she goes, well, you left your badge. You're going to need your badge to get back in. I said, I just quit. I said, I don't need to get back in. I said, I'll see you. So I threw a few things in a box and I was out the door. And the thing that made me the maddest actually was that they made me come in because I was working from home that day. It was a Friday. And then I got stuck in rush hour traffic. That's the thing that annoyed me the most out of the whole
Classic.
thing, that I got stuck in Austin traffic. You all know what that's like. And so then I called him, and I'm like, So I just quit my job, and they explained it, and I was freaking out for about 6 weeks, and every single day looking for a job, and this is like the crappiest time to look for a job, and then 6 weeks later I got a job, and then I realized, well, I could have used that 6 weeks to not be freaking out and kind of, do something better with my mental energy. But then secondly, I got this other job, which was actually perfect. It was just a contract job for a year, which then let me, step into another more permanent situation. Because I was not, I'm like, you know what, I'm just done with jobs that are just not really a perfect fit. So that's, yeah, that's my thing of, I was freaking out for 6 weeks unnecessarily. But yeah, that was my situation of you know, leaving a crappy job, or just having I was done with it. And yeah, it turned out to be one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. And I tell you, it's to people, if you have the chance to do it and you have the resources, and had a lot of resources, and I was in a very privileged position to be able to do that. And I understand that not everybody is, but people, life is too short. Quit that crappy job if it's not fulfilling you, or if it's causing you heartache or anxiety. It's too, it's not worth it. And take it from me, I freaked out for 6 weeks for kind of no good reason, and it worked out, better than I could have hoped for. So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
And did you have that job up into like 2020 or 2019? This contract position, is that what you did?
No, I quit that job in 2008. I was there for
Right.
3 years, just on the A&D account. Yeah. So, but a total of 6 years with the company, split between IBM and A&D. So that was way, way back in the day. But yeah, it still to this day sticks with me on one of the best decisions I've ever made, and also set me up for the rest of my life on you don't have to take you don't have to take it. There's no reason. Just yeah, you don't have to take that crappy job or deal with those, crappy management or employers, or fill in the blank on if it's not.
Tim, how about you? What was your career journey before you realized you had to start making a change, or did make a change?
Well, I think for me, it was uh, back in the, I guess, mid 90s for me. I did enjoy, once I got into working for a software company, it's a really different thing I felt very privileged. I felt very thankful to be able to have that type of opportunity coming from, um, quote, a typical IT environment where you're an expense, right? You're an expense. And now you're in business side of things where, um, it becomes much more interesting. And throughout my career, I hired many people from that, like me, who worked as a IT administrator, data center administrator, or whatever it might be, and bring that, brought them into the software side. And there's a lot of advantages. Certainly, um, you get to, if you're that type of person, you're at the forefront of it. So I always cherished, um, the opportunity to work with those companies. Now that being said, um, it's a tough job. There's a lot that goes on. It can be very political. It's fast moving. It's high stakes. It's all of those things more. Um, uh, we got into, I think, through, can't even tell you if it's still going on now, but I assume it is. There's a lot of, right now the job market's hot, but back in times it was kind of a constant thing of, um, laying off people every year, right? You lay off people and you hire them back, regardless if you're on the side of laying people off or if you're on the side of being laid off, they both kind of suck, right? There's no fun in seeing your friends leave, and there's no fun in leaving sometimes as well. But it also kind of hardens you and gives you a bit of perspective that, you kind of have to organize your life in a way that you can survive those kinds of things and move forward. But I think, as time went on, I kind of had a goal in my mind of what I wanted to do long term, and I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to work the rest of my life in office buildings and, as such, retire and buy a condo someplace and sit around and play golf. That wasn't something that I could do, and I couldn't even, or think about. I didn't want to, even in this case of, talk a little bit more about what we're doing now. I didn't want to get to be 65 and, okay, now we'll go buy a boat and you know, we'll sail Florida, or we'll go to the Bahamas once a year or something like that. It just didn't seem wasn't didn't seem to be as fulfilling. I was looking for trying to figure out a way. The lifestyle is what is not necessarily disconnect or unplug, but just really, I think that for us and for me in particular, as you start to simplify your life and simplify the things that you're doing, in some ways it broadens your perspective so much. As we travel around and spend time in a variety of different places, not as tourists, but as kind of gypsies, if you will, it makes the world uh, smaller, right? But it broadens your perspective. It's a dichotomy of, it makes things seem smaller, but it broadens your perspective.
Hmm.
And that's what I was looking for. Excuse me. Or I thought I was. That was kind of the idea in my head. I fell in love with sailing late in life. I was not one of these guys that grew up as a kid sailing or grew up on the East Coast. I didn't know much about blue water or oceans at all. But I kind of, so, to kind of, that was kind of in the back of my mind. We're going to, at some point, kind of travel a lot and do it on our own terms, and simplify ourselves. We're not going to, and so kind of work towards that. I still liked my jobs. I still enjoyed them, but it did change. I have to be honest. It changed the way I thought about jobs, and work and career. Um, and I know at points in time I had aspirations of being vice president, president, and CEO of companies, and having all this responsibility, and that kind of went away. That I had to make a choice, and it became that I never was one to chase a paycheck, so to speak, but I always wanted a paycheck, right? It wasn't something
Right.
like that. So it wasn't an amount of more and more and more. It was more satisfaction, and so leaving, fast forward, as we were working together, and there was a lot of changes going on in the company, and some I liked and some I didn't like, but we had worked together for many years at that point to get to a point where we could take that risk. And it was a big risk. I mean, we left behind well-paying jobs. We left behind a lot of stuff, right? So we had to, we downsized. We got rid of houses and cars and those kinds of things, and changed our life pretty significantly. But we did it over time. It wasn't a break point. It was kind of doing it over time. And frankly, technology and all of the things now that is commonplace as far as like working remotely and having flexibility, we both got to take advantage of that somewhat very early on. I worked remotely the entire time I was, working with you, Scott, and I think you
Hmm.
did too. Um, that's a big advantage. I think we all. I have this argument with my brother all the time, but I think most people, particularly in our fields, uh, end up working a lot more hours when they're working remotely than they do when they're, in an office every day.
Yeah.
That being said, it gives us a lot more flexibility as well. So that's kind of what started it. That was the goal, and probably 2013 we bought our boat. It was a boat that wouldn't sail, right? It was a boat that needed tons and tons and tons of work, which
Wait a minute, Jeff. So
also
just for a second here,
attracted it to me.
if I could cut you off here, because that sounds funny to me. So
Please.
you both, going way back to summarize, you guys were both early on in your careers going, man, this is not sustainable for me and what I want out of life. And I need something different. And you, Tim, were like, yeah, I think I want to go sail a boat. Never done it, but seems like I want to be in a boat. And so you finally get to a point, you're like, there it is. I can finally have enough resources, whatever money. I'm going to buy a boat, but it's a boat that doesn't work. Is that right? I mean, it just seems funny to me. You don't know how to really sail
It
a boat.
was,
You
and
first boat is,
right.
anyways. Go.
Well, we have to. I guess I left a little part out. We can step back a little bit. So I
Yeah.
started sailing back in the early '90s, So I did know
Oh,
how
okay.
to sail, and I did know boats, and I'd actually refurbished a boat prior. What
Oh,
I
okay. That
didn't really
makes
know
more
though is,
sense.
as we'll get into it, there's a lot more to it when you start talking about ocean sailing versus other things, or coastal sailing versus blue water
Hmm.
crossing, long-term cruising. Um, those are the things, and we'll talk more about this, but I didn't know what I didn't know, and that was probably the biggest. Um, we all get into those situations where you don't know what you don't know. In this case, there was a lot that I thought I knew that I didn't, for sure, but that's part of the fun of it. But there were a lot of these times where you go, whoa, wait a minute now, what do we just get ourselves into, and can we get out of it? Uh, Oh, but yes, there was a lot of new things coming on, and part of it too is we were pretty um, comfortable. We had houses and cars and
Amenities. Yeah.
amenities and food delivered to you, and things just around the corner, and flush toilets, and all of those things that we have over time, if not necessarily given up totally, but given at certain points of time, give up, for sure.
Yeah,
But
but
so
let me interject something here that um, I had, like I mentioned before to y'all, I didn't have any boating experience, no sailing experience, but when he brought it, brought it up to me, like, hey, what do you think about doing this? I said, well, it sounds like it's camping, but you're on the water. And I like water and I like camping, so I mean, it sounds fun. And the reason that it worked, even though we were, I was newer than a newbie, and he was the one with the experiences. That we both went in it. We both approached it with the same goal. Or we want to fix our upper boat. We don't have $200,000 to spend on this swanky boat. We both had skill sets that I'm pretty handy. He's very handy. We're willing to do the work, and we like
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And if the challenge that we see all the time with couples is that they don't have the same baseline. Like either, he wants all the amenities in the sports car, or she's got a. I'm sounding very sexy. She wants the sports cars and the amenities. He is like, I don't need any of that, and that's where the disconnect happens. But we were on the same page and understanding the assignment, and we knew this was not going to be something, in 6 months we're just going to go off and it's going to be all Instagram and beautiful sunsets and all this stuff. We knew that there was stuff was going to go down, and we I feel very fortunate because my father taught me a lot of skill sets, and we're problem solvers, and that's the number one thing, that if you're going to be on a boat or probably in an RV, or I don't know, hiking the Appalachian Trail, you better be a problem solver. And that's
Hmm.
really what it came down to on, I think, why we're successful um, in our endeavor on this. So,
Wow. So how long?
long
So you
answer,
get this
kind of a
boat.
short question. But
No, that. So this is amazing. So you set this goal, but you're still working. I think Tim or Christine, one of you had mentioned that you kind of over time downsized to where you moved into the boat before you fully quit your jobs and left the world, as it were.
yeah,
How long was that transition? Because it sounds like you buy the boat, you got to get it remodeled and repaired before doing that. I mean, and you had the cars, the
yeah.
house. You'd mentioned Tim. How long did it take you to nurse yourself into the point where you're moving into the small space of a boat?
So we did it kind of with we actually lived apart from each other the first, I mean, on and off for the first year that we bought the boat, because
Hmm.
Christine was traveling a lot, um, and her mother was here in Austin, and it just kind of worked out that way. So we were kind of
Because where
apart.
was the boat?
We were traveling a lot anyway. The boat we got was in Florida. It was in near
I
Tampa,
see.
a place called Bradenton. So we had in a marina. It was in Bradenton. We had packed up a bunch of stuff, got it down there, spent the first couple of months just kind of emptying it and disinfecting it almost in a way. It's a beautiful boat. Don't get me wrong, and I can even send you pictures. But it's a classic boat. But it had been abused. It had been totally abused for years. So we kind of tried to resurrect it. Christine came back to Austin. I stayed and continued to work as you would anytime in remotely. I had perfect Wi-Fi access, and I could go to places and work out of the boat or anywhere. So that was not an issue. The biggest issue with that was, particularly starting out, is when you tell anybody I live on a boat, the first thing they think about is this big fancy boat with girls in bikinis on the bow, and you're going to the beach every day, and you're on vacation, right? That is that does happen. There are those people that can do that, but in our case, it was much different. And then the second part, I think, is that we both, one of the big drivers is we both love to travel a lot, and it really didn't matter so much where. Christine traveled a lot in Europe. I got to do some travel that way. Traveled a lot all over the states, and so the being able to kind of see ourselves moving around and really kind of living a more gypsy kind of lifestyle was attractive. So those were kind of the drivers. So once we get going, we're in 2013 is when we first bought the boat. By 2016, yes, in July, almost 3 years to the day, we sailed it down to the Keys. So we left Central Florida, and that was our first big, if you want to call it big,
Now you both still
several
had
hundred
jobs
miles.
at the time, right?
So we took a week or 10 days off. We used our vacation time, and my son came with us, and three of us went on our first, long term. It took us, I think, 4 days to get down there. We had driven down before, found a little marina that we thought we liked, and it was a big trip for us. That was like a big, prior to that, we spent a lot of time at anchor. You might go out overnight, you might go 10, 15 miles away and do some coastal cruising and find a little place to throw down the anchor and cook something on the grill and swim and do those kinds of things. Well, this was a travel. This was leaving uh, with the years that we were able to spend, or the time we were able to spend, to upgrade the boat so that it was safe and we could make that trip. So that was I would kind of break it up into those terms. We got to the Keys, we're still both working, and we were living down there full time, and everything seemed to be working out pretty good. The only downside there was it was a little harder to get to an airport. Usually have to drive 2 hours to Miami or something like that. But it worked fine. It worked well. And so then we set out to now kind of phase two of the upgrade plan. And when do we finally get to cut the cord and go through that phase? And so we spent from 2016 to January of 2019. So Christine quit her job in June, and then I quit at CA in December of 2018. And in January of 2019, we were in the Bahamas. So
Wow.
that was
So real quick,
we spent those 2 years.
Tim, you had said that in that 3 year period, right? A bit of sacrifice. You had to live apart a little for a while, as you both had to do what you had to do to get the boat restored. Was that the same 3 year period where you sold your house? It sounds like you still had a car. I mean, how did you drive yourself to the
We
airport
had a
for
car.
work
We
and
brought the
things?
car down.
Okay.
Yeah. So we still had a car because we had to get to the airport. We had to, and I started as a side kind of gig, playing music again. I was playing in Austin and it kind of stopped when we first moved to Florida, and then when I got to the Keys, uh, stumbled on some opportunities and was doing that at night if I wasn't traveling. or I had time, so that was working out. So we had to have a car, and but I had sold my house, and at the time we weren't married at that time, and then sold um, everything. Basically, I got down to I gave my daughter, I think it was I think it was two little crates, you know, of stuff, right? Things that I might have
Wow.
had of pictures and little
Mm.
things, but pretty all furniture. Uh, Craigslist was, booming. And so
Wow.
either gave away or got rid of or sold everything to the point where almost everything we owned together was either on the boat or we had a Forerunner was in a and then the next phase was to get rid of the cars. And we had a little bit of storage. We had a little storage unit for a while, just a little 5x5, and we got rid of that. Uh,
Before
Hmm.
they went to the Bahamas.
yeah, I guess it was a year before we got
And
it. So
and
we
if you're
just tried
sailing
to
around,
really
where do you park the
minimalize
car?
the stuff we have. Well, at this point, there's at this point we're still living in a marina, right?
Okay.
So for those of you who don't
All right.
understand,
I
if you ever
see.
been to a
Okay.
big marina where you see these boats, we had a slip, we had electricity, um, and we had actually Wi-Fi. So we had Wi-Fi at the marina that was enabled us, and it worked pretty well, enabled us to work and have access to Netflix and those kinds of things. So we still weren't cruising. We weren't what I would call cruising. We were living and working in this environment um, that was still extremely satisfying and fun and different. And yeah, we would still meet all kinds of different, wild people.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's sort of
but
like
we
an
were we were
RV,
still
right? You go to RV, they got
we were
all the
still
hookups.
tied to the earth. Yeah, a little bit like that. Yep.
Gotcha.
Now the difference obviously is um, being in an RV, you're pretty stable. If it rains or the wind blows or you don't have to necessarily fight hurricanes and things like that. It's a little you plug in, um, but in this case you're constantly watching weather even when you're in a so there's a little more to it, quite a bit more to it, but
Yeah.
it's a similar concept. And we've even
Now,
talked at
now
some
wait a
point
minute,
if we
Tim.
get
You're
too old to
mentioning.
get on and off a boat.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But when you
Go
mentioned like
ahead.
the rain or storms or
No, you're
hurricanes,
good.
right? I mean, I'm thinking 2013, 2016. You mentioned you'd quit your job 2019. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there a hurricane that hit the Keys around that time? And did that impact what you guys were doing at all? I'm
2018.
trying to remember if there wasn't what the name of it was. But
Hugely. Yep.
2017.
2017 Irma.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can look it up.
Irma.
Hurricane Irma came through. We had
that's right.
been
Yep.
through some minor tropical storms, uh, but nothing major. We'd been all this, from 13 to 17. We'd been in the Keys. It kind of skirted everything, kind of going around us. Irma came right at us, and it was at the time when it came through the Keys. It was a Category 4, I believe.
4.5.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
140 plus winds coming through. So yeah, so there you have to decide now what are you going to do with the boat. Our initial thought was we would just keep it in the marina. The marina was fairly protected, um, and we were in a beautiful place in the marina where our boat was. But here comes kind of a learning experience. We, or probably more me, got convinced by a couple of other guys in the marina that we should take the boat down to a place called Buki Harbor, which is a huge protected harbor with I don't know, a mooring ball. So a mooring ball is something you can go tie to and it's anchored to the ground. Other versus going somewhere and putting a bunch of anchors out and anchoring yourself to the ground, you're using this mooring ball. And there are people that live in that environment for years and years and work around the Keys. It's a place where people come through if they're going from Florida to the Bahamas or the Caribbean. They stop there because it's a good place to provision. It's a safe place. Anyway, Hurricane Irma's coming. It looks like it's headed right for the Keys. We need to do something. Um, and we decided I let these individuals convince me that this was a safer place to be. So we packed up everything and moved the boat to Boot Key, put it on a mooring ball. We at the time still had 2 cars. We packed everything that we owned. We basically got most everything off the boat, everything into these 2 cars. We would have to take all the canvas off, all the solar panels off, or tie them down, all the sails, a lot of the rigging, just because we knew it was going to be bad. But we didn't stay on the boat. So we decided,
Okay.
luckily we had friends up near where we were before, up at Madeira Beach, it was called, but up near St. Pete. So we, basically shored up the boat, left it in Boot Key, and escaped.
Yeah.
Escaped with the masses leaving to St. Pete, and went. And so the hurricane comes right across us into Boot Key, or the whole marathon. It hit the eye of the storm hit just a little bit south of where we were, and then went up across the Florida Bay and went up the gut of Florida and hit us where we were in Madeira Beach.
By that time,
Wow.
it had lessened to
Yes.
category 2. And our friends, Matt and Carrie, that we stayed with, they're Florida, longtime Florida, so they're like, category 2, whatever.
It's just a hurricane.
It's just a hurricane, no big deal. I kind of slept through the whole thing. I took a pill and slept through it. But yeah, that was an experience. We got, I like to, everybody's like, oh, you got so lucky, you got so lucky. Well, it was, in my mind, a mix between luck and preparation, because we spent 3 days getting our boat ready. And we, kind of thought worst case scenario, you got to take everything off the deck, because, and everything in it, if it's not nailed down, it's going to fly off. And then you have a 140-mile-an-hour projectile, which is not, a good situation.
So was there
yeah.
any damage at all to the boat?
It was minimal. There was boats that were sunk all around us, and boats that
Wow.
had gotten off of their moorings, and all just, it's a disaster. It was a disaster. But we, again, the preparation that Tim did for securing us, and part of it was luck on where we were situated in, amongst the other boats, and kind of the land that was around us, on how the land affected us a little bit in the buildings and all that other thing. But yeah, it was bad. But he got back and
To give you
fired up the engine. And, yeah.
To give you some perspective, there are 240 mooring balls in that bay, in that harbor, and then there are boats that are anchored outside of that area as well. Some better than others. I counted, the numbers are, so there's somewhere between 50 and 60 boats left floating on mooring balls when I got down there. As soon as they would, I think it was 5 days later, as soon as they would let us in. So somewhere upwards of 200, well, probably close to 300 boats either sank or went to the bridge and got crushed, or ended up in the mangroves or somebody's lawn in that harbor.
Wow.
It was literally a disaster area coming in. So, they weren't letting people into the Keys. Because we had been there, we could get back in. It was coming into something where, no electricity, no running water.
No sewer.
So for the citizens down there, let alone, but I can't tell you the relief that we had. We actually found out that the boat was still floating from somebody well, there's 2 ways. There was news cameras down there. Somebody did an interview with a guy at Boot Key on land, and behind him, back way off in the distance, looked like our boat. So that was our first inkling that maybe it survived. And then NASA was taking Noah was taking satellite pictures and posting them of that whole area, and based on that, we could see just a fuzz ball that looked like it was in the area we were in. And so we kind of thought, okay, that was the second thing. And then we had somebody that we knew who stayed down there on land in a place, and they had gotten out in their little boat and come by and actually they found just some area where they were able to get text back and forth because there wasn't any communication down there either. And he texted me and said, "I think your boat is floating."
It's stuck on another boat.
Yeah, it's on top of another boat, but
yeah, it's not sunk. Yeah.
So yeah,
If you
so
had-
I feel personally like we won the lottery. And I never
Yeah.
won the lottery before, but I think for me and for us, we did. We were fortunate.
if you had not moved the boat, what would have happened? Do you know?
We'd have been fine. We'd have been in perfect shape.
No, that's
No,
not true.
it's not. It's hard to tell. Yeah, it is hard to tell.
Yeah.
All of the boats that stayed in our marina, there was some damage. There was damage to the pilings. The boats, though, in the area where our slip was, where we sustained less. So it is hard to tell, but I think we'd have been okay. We have a slip in that marina now that is even in a little more protected spot. So I feel even more comfortable, if that were to happen again. But there are areas. We went through a tropical storm down there on another part of that marina that was much more difficult to deal with because you get these swells. It's not just the wind, it's the surge and the waves that can come through that tear things up. And what happened in Buki a lot was boats broke away, hit other boats. It was just this domino effect of ripping lines and busting things up. And,
Boats can
I
fall off.
wanted to ask you a question, kind of going back to when you said you sold everything and you ended up with just a couple of crates of things. Was that a relief to kind of part with material things, or what? Tell us a little bit about how you felt or how you feel even now about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So since I was living at my mom's house, so I'm a planner by nature. And so once we thought, okay, we're going to do this, and it took us a year to find that boat. We were on the boards. It took us a year to find it. And so when we knew we were going to do this, and for sure committed to do it, I would every 6 months I would look at my clothes, my possessions, all the stuff that you accumulate, and if I had not interacted with that item or it didn't fit, the clothes didn't fit me perfectly or whatever, I got rid of it. And so I started just every 6 months parsing, paring down, thinking about what was needed, and we would get on the user forums and just watch YouTube videos and okay, what do people really need versus what they thought they needed. And I think that we did a pretty good job. But yeah, it took every 6 months I would pare down cars, think about it, and then also realizing that if an item was not doing what I needed it to, let's say a pair of shorts, for instance, you can always buy a better pair of shorts. So get rid of it, get the better pair of shorts, really be methodical in thinking about how an item is going to serve you. And the thing that was living on the boat, if you can find an item that does more than one thing, then that's golden. You're like, yes, that's awesome. Or an item that doesn't require any power because we're on a 12-volt system. We don't have, unless we're at the marina, we don't have can't just plug in a blender, and have a margarita, unless you're at the marina, and then yes, please. Anyway, so that's how I did it, and I loved it. I loved it because it's just discovery of what is really important, what do I need. It made me feel lighter, it made me feel more agile, and and then that helped me with other things too. Don't have a bunch of stuff in your car. Don't, keep your inbox tidy. Make folders for stuff, and because you have to be organized on the boat. You can't just, oh, I'm going to set that down and pick it up 4 days later because space is at a premium. So I really enjoyed it, and I take it as an extreme sport on, like, you have all these tiny little spaces on the boat, and how much can I get in one place, and how do I, you know, put these things together to make it safe for it to travel underway also, because it can get a little bit rough under there. So just if you're underway, so just the safety, just to make sure things are secure and good to go. So I really enjoyed it, and still to this day, I'm like, do I really need that thing? Because if I can get rid of it, I'll, either take it to Goodwill or, yeah.
Yeah, and I
So,
think for me, she's fantastic with, as you can tell, from minimizing things and organizing things, which has been, I can't tell you how helpful that is, how necessary that is, and I've learned from all of that. But for me, getting rid of things was most things I don't have a lot of attachment to. It just becomes stuff, and I can't say that it was. There weren't times that were tough. I think for me, it mostly was, I have two children that are grown, but you always think of, what do they remember? What are the things that they, well, I just turned it around on them. So if there were things that they wanted, they owned, um, and anything of sentimental value, things like that. But as far as, whether it's artwork walls or if it's furniture, you know, tools in the garage or the shed or all of those kinds of things did not. That was very, I think at the end, extremely, not, what's the right word? It takes a big weight off your shoulders, right? You learn that you really don't, you only need the stuff you want, right? I mean, and I think that it depends on the person, but for us, we didn't need all of that stuff. It was definitely lightning for us, and that goes for whatever it was, whether it's car payments or house payments, from a financial standpoint too. I am really, really good at finding the bottom of the market and selling what I have. Uh, I've done it multiple times and will continue to, but was not real successful from that perspective. I think the housing market where my house was exploded after I finally got the house sold, and it was in its worst shape when I did sell it. But that being said, I was able to walk away, and what we had planned to do and wanted to do was much more important to me than the extra money. And it was the same way when I decided to quit, with the last job I had as well. The timing was right for us. We were ready to go. We had been through it all. We had spent a month in prior to that repowering our boat. We put a new engine in it, and both of us worked in September in the Keys, so the hottest period of time. And we did hire a mechanic to do the hard work, if you will, the technical work, if you say, but we did all of the grunt work. So we were able to find somebody that would let us work with him, reduced our cost quite a bit. But it was another learning experience, another very, it was every day we'd be to the boatyard. And boatyards are nothing but dirt and dust and grime. Um, and yeah, we would usually get up as early as we could as soon as the sun was up and try and work till mid-afternoon until we couldn't go any longer. And we did that for almost 30 days. So we kind of got through that, and we decided that 2019 was going to be our first trip to the Bahamas. Everything kind of fell in place. There was a lot of changes going on, at CA at the time, and to me, it felt like, the best time to make cut the cord and get going. So, so that was our first, real, what I think of as our first just real leap into a lot of unknowns, a lot of things that we didn't know, but we had friends and we had people that guided us and gave us some advice and helped us. Some of it was good and some of it wasn't, right? But it all kind of worked out. So we spent our first 4.5 months or so, I guess, January through into May, in the Bahamas, and decided then to come back to the Keys. And so it's a lot of boaters will you'll hear the term shakedown cruise. Will take your boat out and really kind of stress it and test yourselves and what works and what doesn't, and no matter how old or new a boat is, it has stuff that doesn't work and breaks. It doesn't matter. It could be right off and sometimes that's even worse, right? So we kind of put it through its test. We put ourselves through our own kind of tests, and had a lot of successes, but then thought there's certain things we wanted to fix and get a little more experience under our belt. So we came back from the Bahamas, which we would have anyway. The choice there was either continue to go farther down into the Caribbean chain and try and get south far enough to get out of the hurricane belt, or come back to Florida. We had a little bit of a home base to work on some things. So that's what we did. And we did a lot of sailing during that time. And then 2020, we did it again. We spent that winter season in the Bahamas, and that's when COVID hit. So then everything changed. So,
So Tim, I
but you
have so
learn,
many questions for
I
both
think
you and
Scott
Christine, because
yeah,
I'm just sitting here thinking that you tell, oh yeah, we just went to the Bahamas, or we just went where these are massive distances for people who take this for granted, right? I mean, you're on a boat and it's got to go somewhere overnight, right? It's still got to get to its destination. I mean, how do you do that? That's part of it. I mean, how does that? Yeah, I'm just like, wow, this is sailing at night. How do you sleep? And then the other part is, how do you make ends meet? Right? You were mentioning that this wasn't a retirement; this is a lifestyle change. So if you guys could answer that, go ahead, Christine.
You bet.
Okay, so we own a sailboat, and it's very heavy. We love her. But she's a fat bottom gal, so she doesn't go very fast. Some sailboats will go very quick. She is not one of them. And so that plays a lot into your planning. The boat doesn't go more than 10 miles an hour. 7 miles an hour. Okay. So basically, Usain Bolt on a bad day runs faster than our boat can go at its top speed. So that's part of the planning, though. You have to know if we're doing 6 knots and we have to go 48 nautical miles, that's just math. So it all winds up being math on to figure out where you're going, what's the weather going to do. And I forgot the question.
I kind of, one of the things I say, see the world at 7 miles an hour. We plan anywhere between 5 and 6 knots. The boat, at its best will go 7. It will go faster if you're, surfing down a wave. But in general, we're planning our trips anywhere between 5 and 6 knots would be, 6 or 7 miles, to put it in perspective. The closest place to check in or land in the Bahamas from the Florida Keys is Bimini. So in a straight line from, say, Fort Lauderdale to Bimini is about 50 miles, give or take. Yeah, give or take, right in that area. We're coming from middle of the Keys, so it ended up being about 160 some miles. Sorry about that, 160 some miles trip. So we left the Keys. We left kind of mid-morning with the plan of arriving in Bimini by sunup, because one of the things you don't like to do either is, particularly in an area you don't know, but we make it a practice of not going into a port or a harbor that we don't know when it's dark. So we always do that when the sun's up, when it's light. We try to do it when the sun is behind us and not in your eyes. land is a huge danger for a sailboat, right? So that first trip we made, we stopped in Bimini. We ended up getting there about an hour or two before sunrise. So we sat off about, I think it was 6 or 7 miles offshore, and the wind had died to nothing, and we just sat there. Actually, I slept. And for a couple of hours, the sun came up. We started motoring into this little marina we were going to. So that was you're crossing the Gulf Stream, which is a big thing for a lot of people. The current now in the Gulf Stream, just as a side note, there were times we were going over 10 knots because you get into that current and it's going to give you another 2 or 3 knot boost, and we were, you can really tell you're hauling, for that amount of time. It's dark. There's also a huge shipping channel in between, the Bahamas and the mainland. So on the in the Gulf Stream, you've got boats going north, and then on the eastern side of the Gulf Stream, you've got a lot of ships going south. So you have to navigate your way, whether it's cruise ships and mostly tanker ships, across those channels. And we have it's actually we have radar, we have chart plotters, and we also have something called AIS, which is relatively new in that all large boats, all tanker boats, are required to basically ping their position. And we have this receiver that tells us who they are, how big the boat is, how fast they're going, and what direction they're heading. So we can kind of tell whether we need to go in front or behind and watch those kinds of things. That's a huge thing, right? And it's a huge thing to get used to too. The first time we did it, it was, we literally had to slow down and wait for 2 tankers to cross us and then speed up again to go into the middle of the night. And it can be a little scary at times. But in general, it's as long as you get that under your belt and you start watching it, it's not nearly as hard as it may seem. But it is definitely something we watch for all the time. And we've had situations where we were sailing into Key Biscayne. If you don't know where that is, Key Biscayne, we're
By Miami.
near Miami, just south of Miami.
Biscayne, yes.
The Nixon Mansion was there and all that. And we had a mega yacht, which is, these mega yachts can be anywhere from 120 to 100 and whatever, 200 plus feet long, big boats. You would imagine that they're run by professional captains and there are people on there paying attention. We almost got run down by one, not thinking, but he was out of the channel and he moved into the channel heading right for us. And Christine got on the radio and finally got him to talk to us. And he acted like it was nothing. It was nothing. She said, what are your intentions? We were in the, it's one thing to be in the right of way, but you got to be out of the way too. And he said, okay, well, I'll slow down, and he did. And we went on by him, and he took off. But had we not done that, it could have been bad. And this is somebody you would expect to, you can't take anything for granted, I guess is,
Wow.
is the bottom line there. But, and let alone just the people that are out there goofing around, but these professionals you would understand. So you're always on watch. We always have somebody on watch overnight. We do a thing we call a kind of a 3-on 3-off shift. Some people do 4 hours on, 4 hours off, because you do have to sleep. So one of us will be down below sleeping for 3 hours, and one will be out in the cockpit watching. And we do that during the night. During the day, we're both usually up, but during the night, we do that until we either get to where we're going or the sun comes up.
So we do have on the boat autopilot. So it is, and there's tons of different autopilots. And so we are not having to hand steer the whole time. You kind of set the heading and, it'll take you generally. If you set the heading to, 180 degrees, it'll take you in that.
It stays on a magnetic course.
Yes, it stays on
Wait a
a
minute.
magnetic course. So, we're not.
How does that work? I mean, because I'm thinking a sailboat, you got to reposition the sails, don't you, sometimes to catch the wind? Or No.
Depending on the wind. Yep.
So how does the
Right. So you're
autopilot
always
work?
watching and adjusting. Yeah. So what it does is in ours in particular, there are a couple, like Christine mentioned, there's a couple different varieties, but ours is the dead simple variety, in that it has an internal compass. Um, and so you basically set it on a course and lock it in, and it will then steer to that course within, a few degrees, right? So every boat's going to go like this, and it's going to stay within this um, bandwidth, yeah, for example. And so then you continue to watch over time, and you watch on your chart plotter, or you're taking bearings or whatever it might be. And if it starts to get off, you can then adjust it. There are others that are much more integrated into your chart plotter, where you say, I want to go here, and it will basically make sure it gets more looking to get to that point as opposed to staying on a magnetic course. We like the simple part of it. It drives our boat well. It steers better than I can steer it, or either one of us can steer it. Um, and it's mandatory, because if you're going, the second trip we took from the Keys to the Bahamas, we went all the way to a place called Chub Key, which ended up being less than 300 miles. I think it ended up being 250 some miles or 70 miles. So that was leaving in the morning and getting there that night. Um, and so that's I guess that would be the longest, one of the longest trips. We've crossed from Florida to Charleston, North Carolina, a couple different times, but that's just one of those things where, and there we had to kind of guide ourselves through some of the barrier islands of the Bahamas and across the Bahama Bank. But there's nothing more beautiful than sailing across like that in the middle of the night. The weather's great, the stars are out, the moon is out. Especially if the moon is out, it's like, it's like a huge spotlight on you, and you see the luminescence in the water, and it's very peaceful, and you kind of feel like you're the only people in there.
So, and also, obviously, if there's no breeze or no appreciable breeze, then we turn the engine on. And so a lot of times, it seems like sailing is 70% motoring and 30% you got the sails up. And then there's a thing called motor sailing, where the wind, it's 10 or 11 knots, and it's not, you could sail, but you'd be going 3 knots. So you turn on the engine and just give it a little assist. And yeah, so a lot of motoring is also involved in the pursuit of sailing. But yeah, and then just keeping, it's pretty much got the weather app open all the time, just seeing what the weather's doing, because and does it just have a mind of its own, of course, but you can just kind of sometimes, well, the weather's going to do this, but we want to get to this place, and are we just going to have to be uncomfortable for a day, and just in order to get there? And then that's a decision that we make together on, yeah, let's be uncomfortable, but we want to get there because of X, Y, and Z factor. And that changes every single day. So my number one thing is, for sailing or boating, you have to be flexible and keep an eye on what's going on and be open to change and changing plans. And a lot of people get into trouble because they were very set on what they wanted to do, and then something happened, and then they got themselves into a little bit of trouble. But I think we work as a really good team, because I'm a worry wart, and I'm the one that has plan D. And I'm like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? It's
That'll never happen.
yeah, that's a daily occurrence. But yeah, but it's good, because if we were both worry warts, we would still be sitting in the dock. Or if we were both, not so concerned about the plan, or what are we going to do, and being very prescriptive on our approach. Yeah, I think that's how our partnership works really well.
Yeah, there is a saying within the cruising community of, anybody you meet, is you don't sail to a schedule. You don't tell people, particularly one of the things that's interesting too is, as we're going to the Bahamas, and especially if you're in a marina with all your friends are around and people you know, they're always wondering, well, when are you leaving? When are you going? Well, we're going when the weather is right. Sailboats do not sail directly into the wind. It can be very uncomfortable when you're even somewhat off the wind. So we look for those times, and so it's
Hmm.
it's um, it's difficult to say I'm going to be here at such and such a time, which makes it hard too, because we've got family, and sometimes they want to meet us somewhere, or you might want to try and organize something. It's difficult to do that. You kind of have to let the weather guide you in many ways, and you have to. We watch the weather, and when we're going, we're watching the weather all the time. I mean, it's 3, 4, 5 times a day. Um, Even when we know it doesn't only change, the forecast only change twice a day, but we still look to see that has anything changed. We also have access. The second trip we took, we purchased this thing called excuse me, it's called InReach. No, it's called Iridium Go. InReach is the other one. That is a little satellite communicator box that can link to these satellites, and we can download email and get weather forecasts anywhere in the world. But so that gives us a little bit of connectivity, particularly in the Bahamas or in the middle of the Atlantic somewhere, or places where you don't have any kind of cell service that will give you that information. And, that's been a
Wow.
big help, particularly in many places.
And also, just so when we started, my mother was still alive, and she's where I get my worry tendencies from. So she's like, "Where are you going to be? Where are you going to be? Where are you going to be?" And the thing is that we found that the people who our family members that didn't know anything about sailing, they were their fear came from not knowing what it was about.
Hmm.
And so we set expectations. It's like, listen, we will communicate with you when we can, but there's not going to be a weekly check-in. There's not going to be. You're just going to have to deal with that and be okay with that. And then once and so they're like, okay. And then once we were, sending pictures to them, and we just got the new motor, and we were still based in Florida at that time and giving them updates. At least my mom shifted position on. She's like, that's very exciting, and I'm sure she's still worried personally, but it wasn't the text like I haven't heard from you in a week. I'm going to call the Coast Guard type of thing.
Yeah.
So
So
that was
you guys
another
say you
thing
got
about
family,
managing
you go
expectations.
visit them. You're in Austin, I think you said right now. So how do you handle income now? I mean, you mentioned Tim that you'd played music. Do you go and on occasion pick up
Yeah.
a gig here and there? I mean, I'm
So
assuming
right
you guys
now,
hadn't retired, right?
well, we're open to just about anything, and what we decided back then was we had enough that we knew we could do this for several years. Um, but I think the two biggest things was we had to drastically reduce our expenses. Um, so we've done things to where we can that kind of help um, counter all of that. So we don't have car payments, we don't have cars, we don't have insurance payments, and those kinds of things. We don't have mortgages. Um, our expenses when we're cruising are very minimal. From most of the time we spend at anchor. So that's a whole nother chapter of how do you live unhooked. So most of the time we would be in a harbor somewhere at anchor, um, where we're not paying any fees. Uh, Certainly, if you're in places like the Bahamas, your food and those kinds of things are a little more expensive. But we do most things ourselves. We do most of the work. Anything we can do on the boat, we do it all ourselves, or we figure that out. We don't eat at the time a lot in restaurants. Although we do, it's not like we don't do anything, but we do um, go out. But it's very very minimal. and
Fuel is
and
expensive thing.
yeah, we try not to, use fuel or motor as much as possible. We do. So fuel is an expense we have on occasion. And frankly, right now it's a little different because once COVID hit and we got stuck in the Bahamas. Stuck is a bad term, but we ended up we were in the Bahamas at a place called Daniel Key, where some of you might, people remember or hear about the swim with pigs kind of thing in the Bahamas. There's this island in the Bahamas that somebody put all these huge pigs um, on a beach, and people comes a tourist attraction. People come and
Feed the pigs.
feed the pigs. But we end up near there when the COVID lockdown started in 2020. And we were there in April. We ended up having to spend the entire month. So, anyways, a side note. So our life has been quite a bit different uh, since that happened because we ended up coming back. Um, I would play some music as I could along the way, not much, but certainly when I came back to the Keys, I still had, like connections to places I could play. That helped. So right now we've just mainly focused on reducing, our expenses as much as possible. And as time goes on, if we need to pick up things here and there, I've helped, deliver boats on occasion. I just came back from one where it was a friend of mine had bought a boat and he needed help just moving it from Jacksonville down to Cape Canaveral. Very simple. I helped have done deliver boats from North Carolina to Florida. So there's always possibilities. Christine picks up some things every once in a while too, but right now that hasn't been a big focus for us. We've been very fortunate in that we've been able to keep our expenses low enough uh, that we're still okay.
Well, and part of my story on being able to afford this lifestyle is that my father passed away in 2016, and he gave me his house, and so I was able in 2018 to sell that house, and I'm very very fortunate to have that situation, but yeah, so.
So we've been able to invest that,
Yeah,
and
Mm.
that's helped out a little bit. And we meet, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is this whole lifestyle that we've kind of glommed onto. We've met the most amazing people that you can think of from all different walks of life, all ages. From Christine knows it much better. There's a couple of girls that we know that have been um, traveling now for I guess the last year or two.
Yeah.
They're sisters. I think they're 18 and 19 years old. What have you? That have a boat similar to ours, and they're doing it on their own. Yeah, with a little bit of help from their dad, who was the sailor, and he's taught them, and they're off doing all kinds of things.
Wow.
I met a 78-year-old man. We had made the crossing to Charleston, North Carolina. Was at the marina there, getting ready to go farther north into the Chesapeake, and I met a guy. Guy came right up, beside us on the pier there. 77 years old. He was single-handing from Miami, heading to Connecticut.
Wow.
And it stopped in Charleston because he had some boat problems. Stopped to get something fixed, and then was heading back to head north. I've met two of those guys now that have been single-handed. But you meet and everybody in between. Professional people, families with kids, every walk of life you can think of, every character that you can imagine, you'll, they're out there doing some of it. And it's, so that part is exciting and fun.
So it sounds like you guys are really missing the corporate world.
It seems like yeah, no. But the common theme with most people is that they're doing it, and that's everybody has one eye on money. But also, it's more important to do it than to, they prioritize doing it versus working. And I know, so the young women that Tim mentioned, they do the Bahamas for 5 months, and then they'll come and they will work their butts off for 4 or 5 months, and then they go back out. So, you run into people like that, and then you run into some people, you know, yeah, they sold a business and they have millions of dollars. And those are the people that, you don't think that, but like Tim mentioned, lots of different folks and lifestyles and situations, and um, the common denominator is they're all doing it and trying, and took the leap that they could do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and people
Well,
do all kinds of things, whether it's mechanic work or, there are people that are good with a sewing machine, they'll do canvas work. There'll be people that are good on electronics, computers, what have you, that do that kind of work along the way. And I've met a lot of, and certainly more and more now, where we meet people that do it in stages and are, doing contract work, coders, that are writing code on their boat for 3 months, and then they go sail for 3 months and come back, and there's all different kinds of ways. Nurses that may do um, travel nurses that may do contract work for a period of time and then take off. So it's a huge variety, and it is a
Wow.
small community in a lot of ways too. We do see some of the same people. We've come across there are people we've met that we saw in the Bahamas and pulled into marina, and there the boat was. So your boat name is kind of a big thing, and everybody recognizes you by that. And so yeah, several times we were in the intercoastal going up through North Carolina, I guess it was, and a boat came up behind us and hailed us on the radio that we had met in the Bahamas during the COVID thing. So it just happened. They were heading south, and they were going faster than we were, and came by us. So it is somewhat of a small community as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, hey, we want to thank you. This has been fascinating. We could keep asking you tons and tons of questions. Especially love hearing about your journey, going from the corporate world to, I guess, easing into this transition to a boat, and hearing the stories about making that leap. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are probably going to say, "Gosh, I should really do something like that too in my life." And I'm thinking that too. It's like, wow, this is you're living the dream. So we want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your story with our listeners. Scott, anything else you want to add?
No, I think it was great. Tim and Christine, thank you for sharing your story, hopefully inspiring others. Like you kind of ended with Christine, there's lots of different opportunities to do a lot of different things. Those girls you were saying, they work 6 months so they can sail the next 6 months. I mean, there's ways to make it. Sounds like whatever you want to make happen. You just got to be willing to pay the price and do the work, as you said.
Yeah, and I think it's there may be a stigma of people that are trying to escape something. I don't think either one of us were in that boat, and there certainly are some of them, but I think most of the people that we've met they're either older and trying to health is a big issue, particularly the types of things we're doing, so we do have to stay healthy and able. But there's people that decide they're going to go for 3 or 4 years and then they're going to go back to work, or they're going to take their kids and homeschool them for and there are people that said that and end up doing it for 20 years, right? That never go back. And it's I think that's what we look at is there's all kinds of ways to accomplish what you want to accomplish, what you have in your head. There's no one way to do it. And
there's no right way and there's no wrong way. It's just the way that works for the situation and the
use your imagination.
And
you'll get
just get out there and do it. So Hey, again, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it. And with that, we'll close it out. You can
Cool.
find us on any podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, all of the big podcasts. You can also find us at quityourcrappyjob.com and at quityourjob. I always
At
mess this
Quit
one up,
Crappy
Scott.
Job.
Quit Crappy Job. At Quit Crappy Job on Twitter. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again on a future podcast.
Thank you for joining us today. Listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Quit Crappy Job. Find us on YouTube at Quit Your Crappy Job. Contact us at quityourcrappyjob@gmail.com. Music is provided by Kelton Levitt. He can be reached at kelton.levitt@gmail.com.